Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and welcome to your weekly forecast for the week of August 26th through September 1st. In addition to a new moon this week and Mercury ingressing into Virgo, this is the Everything Trines Uranus week. We're going to be seeing a number of trines to Uranus from all of the planets that have recently ingressed into Virgo. So that's something to keep an eye on this week, and we'll talk about that as we go through our video. We've got a Venus trine to Saturn, retrograde Saturn, at the end of the week as well. So the kind of aspects we're looking at are the trines to Uranus, Venus trining Saturn, a new moon in Virgo in the first decan of Virgo on Thursday, and then what's the last thing? Oh yeah, and then the Mercury moving into its domicile and exaltation of Virgo. Interesting little quirk there with the essential dignities where Mercury in Virgo has both domicile rulership and exaltation. So really powerful Mercury going to be happening towards the end of the week. Okay, let's dive right into it. Let's talk about our essential dignities here. So the sun has moved into the first decan of Virgo, where it has dignity by decan or face. So we've moved out of our beautiful Leo domicile triplicity rulership, and the sun's lost a little bit of dignity, but it still has dignity by face, and also it's going to be in its own, in the terms of Mercury, and it's not in its own terms, but it's in the terms of Mercury. And one of the things we're going to see as we go through the week is our solar power is going to pick up a little bit as Mercury improves its own condition by moving out of the end of Leo and into the first decan of Virgo, because Mercury is going to be in its own bounds and terms, and we'll talk about that, and its own domicile. So Mercury just gets a huge boost towards the end of the week, which is good because it's hosting or providing resources and setting the terms, really, for most of these planets that we have right now. We have the Sun, Venus, Mars, the Moon also later in the week, are going to be in the sign of the Virgin, Virgo, and really are going to be responding, I think, in a much healthier way when Mercury improves his own condition. So we'll keep an eye on that. Jupiter, of course, is still in Sagittarius, in the domicile of the Centaur, in its own home sign, and has triplicity at night. So if you're going to be doing Jupiterian things, may have a little bit more wind in the sails in the evening. Retrograde Saturn is in its own domicile of Capricorn, so all the Saturnian things are supported for better or for worse, because he is very strong in his home sign of Capricorn. Mars doesn't seem to have much dignity this week, and yeah, it lost its bound rulership as it moved out of Leo into Virgo. Of course, in the last few degrees of Leo, Mars was able to set its own terms and be its own kind of curriculum setter. And now it has to kind of follow the rules of Mercury. So that's one of the things that is a main theme for this week, is everything's kind of following Mercury's rules. And what kind of rules does Mercury want to set? Well, Mercury wants communication. Mercury wants to destabilize things. Mercury wants to divide things into categories. Mercury wants to flit around very quickly from one thing to the next. Mercury is also representing merchants and people who want to learn things. So there may be skills that you need to learn over the course of the next week or two. And Mercury is requiring that you become very skilled at what you're doing and really figuring out what stays and what goes, especially in the sign of Virgo, which is all about the harvest. Okay. Venus is going to be in her own terms from 7 degrees to 17 degrees of Virgo and have triplicity in the daytime. So Venus is the daytime triplicity ruler of the earth signs. Of course, triplicity is associated with the elements. So Venus, despite being in her depression, or in her fall in Virgo, okay, is going to have some other mitigating factors that will help boost her effectiveness. Now, this is not a happy Venus, though, because it's in its fall. It's in kind of the bottom of the wheel of fortune. It may have difficulty creating harmony because it's noticing all of the flaws and all of the little details that are, uh, imperfect. And a Virgo Venus can be very particular about what it wants when in love or in relationships or in any part of your chart that is hosted or ruled by Venus. You may be getting a little bit meticulous, and that can create some uncomfortable feelings. But Venus being in her own terms is going to help that. It's going to help when a planet is in the terms of Venus. The etiquette that's being set is using good manners, creating beauty and balance, trying to harmonize through the way that we express our artistic sensibilities. So those are the kind of the curriculum that Venus is setting, and she's able to do that a little bit better when she's in her own terms there. We're going to talk a little bit about the tarot card associated with the second decan of Virgo too, which is the Nine of Pentacles, as we move further on in the video here. Mercury, as I've said, is still in late stages of Leo at the beginning of this week, but is going to be moving into its own domicile and exaltation on the 29th. It also, when that happens, it's also going to be its own term. So it's going to have rulership by domicile, exaltation, and by being in its own terms. So Mercury is really the focal point of the week. Besides all of our trines to a retrograde Uranus, Mercury is kind of the theme, and we're going to be really experiencing more of a mercurial energy, which is, as I said, a little bit more fast moving, a little bit more flexible. There's a lot of flexibility that's being presented to the planetary table at this point, where we had a lot of fixed energy when things were in Leo, where we may have been a little bit more set in our ways. Now we have to make adjustments. The mutable signs are when we have a transition from one season to the next. So we're transitioning from the heat of summer to the coolness of fall, and a lot of times you'll see weather patterns being indicative of both seasons around this time as well. Out here in the Midwest, we're having a fairly cool kind of fallish type of day, and that's sort of the indication that fall is on its way. It's not the end of summer necessarily. It doesn't mean we're not going to have any more summer. I mean, it is technically the end of summer, but we're going to probably have a few more hot days here and there. But we're going to see things starting to creep in with that fall weather. And this has metaphorical value too. We're going to see things starting to creep in with that fall season, where we're preparing, for the colder days ahead. We are figuring out and harvesting all of the things that we started doing and planting and growing over the course of the summer, and figuring out what we need to store for the winter. And also that helps us to realize what stays and what goes. We don't want to store the stuff that's rotting. We don't want to store the stuff that has no use or no purpose, because we have to be really efficient as we go into the fall and winter months. Efficiency is really the key with Mercury and with all the Virgo placements. It's not enough to be diverse when things are in Virgo. It's not enough to just learn something for the sake of learning it. What we learn has to be useful. What we learn has to be practical. What we learn has to have a place in our lives. So we're trying to figure out this week what the place, everything that we're learning and incorporating and digesting, because Virgo is associated with the intestines. What are we digesting in the life, and what kind of nutrients are we pulling out of that and feeding whatever needs to be processed within the body? And it also requires some elimination as well. So it's kind of like getting rid of the crap, literally, sorry, and then keeping the vitamins that we need to feed our lives. Okay, so that's Mercury in its own terms, domicile and exaltation. The moon is going to be moving through its own domicile of Cancer at the beginning of the week, and has some rulership by face or decan in the last decan or last 10 degree section of Cancer. So 20 to 30 degrees Cancer, it has kind of a double whammy of good stuff. going on. So lunar things are supported at the beginning of the week. When the moon moves into Virgo, it has triplicity by night, and it's going to be having a host that is in pretty good condition, with Mercury being, very strong at this point. So something to consider. Okay, well, let's dive into it. Also, what we're experiencing this week is a balsamic moon. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll talk about that. Okay, you can see here that the moon is at the beginning of the week is in Cancer, and it is, as it moves through the day, it's going to be moving within 45 degrees behind the sun. Okay, so we have this relationship here between the moon and the sun, and generally when it becomes 45 to 0 degrees behind the sun, that's called a balsamic moon. And the balsamic moon is when it is at the very end of the cycle. This is the dark moon cycle. This is when we can barely see the moon or can't see the moon at all. It's just like this dark sliver or becomes invisible. And we're processing everything that we learned from the beginning of this cycle, this last moon cycle. And we are kind of figuring out what stays, what goes, what we've learned from it, what kind of legacy we want to condense into the seed for the new start. So the beginning of this week is going to be about kind of figuring out what you learned from the last lunar cycle that began a few weeks ago. And, of course, we had the last new moon, the full moon cycle, the flowering, and now everything's fallen off the vine. We've gotten the plants starting to decay, and the seed is kind of planting itself in the fertile ground, going underground to get ready to germinate at the new moon. A new impulse will germinate, a new karmic cycle will germinate at that new moon. But all these things are connected. So this may be, the time to figure out what you're going to be bringing with you from the summer into the fall. And there are some feelings that may be of being a little bit out of sync with your life when we're preparing for that new start. It's always a little bit challenging to let go sometimes of things. But this is a time for distilling. We're distilling all the wisdom into that compact seed to be planted again. This is a good time for making peace, for kind of, if you had some conflicts that came up in Leo season, maybe it's time to move forward and move past it so you're not carrying all that baggage with you into the next season or the Virgo season or the next lunar cycle. You're always going to feel a lot lighter if you aren't bringing physical and emotional baggage with you. So Virgo season is not necessarily just about getting rid of the tangible things. This could be about releasing old thought patterns and old emotional things that we're hanging on to that no longer really serve us and aren't really, contributing to our day-to-day life. So that's something to look out for with the balsamic moon phase. That's going to be pretty much active up until the Friday new moon. Yeah, I said the new moon was on Thursday earlier, but it's actually very early in the morning on Friday. But we're going to be feeling a build up to that, or maybe even like a let go to that. I don't even know if it's build ups to new moons. It's kind of like releasing to new moons, right? Okay. So at the beginning of the day here, let's talk about some of the aspects that we're seeing. The moon's going to be making a sextile to Mars very early in the morning. You can see that in my chart here, it's already passed. Okay. So moon in Cancer making a nice supportive sextile to Mars. And of course, sextiles are of the nature of Venus. So that's a harmonizing aspect where there's kind of a nice benefic support between one another. And anytime the moon is activating Mars, this may be a nice little boost to our energy levels, to our abilities to take action, our abilities to, cut the things out of our lives that we don't need anymore with Mars' severing action. But in this case, this may be helping to use the more positive qualities of Mars and using our ability to take action in a more productive way when the moon is making a positive aspect with it. The moon's also going to be sextiling Venus. You can see here that it's the similar aspect of the nature of Venus. So this is another boost for Venusian matters, where it'll be a little bit easier to create some of the balance and beauty and harmony. Remember, the moon is something that brings things into form and helps them pass out of being. It's some of the things it's a manifester, it's a trigger. So when the moon is triggering these things, it's going to be bringing about some of the things that these planets signify. And, Venus, of course, signifies, relationships, cleanliness, ritual, the ability to harmonize. So this may be a great time to just kind of clean out the things in your life that you don't need anymore. KonMari the crap out of your living space. I know that one of the projects I have after I finish all my astrological duties today is to start engaging with a very cluttered attic. I've got some, my new landlord's putting in insulation in the attic, new insulation, which is good. It's a positive thing, but there's a bunch of junk up there that I need to clear the path. So for something good to happen, which is probably going to happen closer to I would say the full moon of this cycle, I've got to release some of the old stuff that may be blocking the manifestation of that new energy. So that's something to keep in mind, especially with Venus things too. Venus is associated. One of the things that has been really helpful for my understanding of Venus from a traditional perspective is Venus was associated with cleanliness. And I look to Venus now to see like, oh, okay, this is a really supportive time frame for cleaning up the things in life. And especially when Venus is in Virgo, it's really able to get down to the nitty gritty and put the work in to cleaning up some of the excess. And I really appreciate that about Venus now. Venus isn't just pleasure, and it of course is those things as well. But having cleanliness and ritual as a additional signification of Venus is very helpful for understanding what her role might be in our life. Okay, as we move forward through the day, the moon is going to be sextiling from the opposite direction, Uranus. So this is one of our Uranian contacts for the week. Okay, so this is kind of like two sextiles at once, as we have Venus and Uranus being activated by the moon kind of at the same time by harmonious aspects. So this is this is a good time to not only clean things out, but be innovative in the way that you're thinking about things. Like recognize that the things that you're taking out of your life are going to help bring that new start and are part of the Uranian restructuring of the way that you view your resources. I know for me in my attic, I have a lot of old things from my childhood up there. And everything has, and this is probably going to be the difficult part of this, because everything has sentimental value. And being a Cancer sun and Mercury, everything I touch triggers these flashbacks of memory. And sometimes it makes it very difficult to throw something out, because what you feel like is that you're throwing out your history. And a lot of our Cancerian impulses, we get attached to our history. What I found is useful for that, if you're going through this yourself, is take a picture of it. If I look at a picture of something, I don't necessarily have to have the physical object to get that feeling, that little dopamine boost of memory, because that's really what it is. We're getting this nice feeling. And you know what? Sometimes there's bad memories associated with this stuff, and why would you want to keep those things? Yes, it's important to understand your history and understand your story and where you've come from and where you're going. But you've got a journal for that. You've got, other ways to see the timeline of your life. You've got astrology and things like that. So why keep all the junk? And again, I love these videos because I tend to watch them myself as I go through the week. This is almost like advice to yourself when you do these things too. My moon also being in Taurus, I do get attached to the physical thing. One of my, I would say, tendencies is if I like something, I'll wear it or keep it until it's threadbare. I'm doing that with a pair of shoes right now. I have a pair of shoes that I really love that I don't want to quite give up, but they're starting to get holes in the soles and it's starting to fall apart, and it's time to maybe let them go and start something new. But for all the Taurus type people in your life, this might be a theme. Maybe if they have a favorite thing, they're going to use it until it just completely crumbles into dust. That's what I've noticed in my own personality and with some of my Taurus-inspired friends. Anyway, so that's going to be the beginning of the day. The other aspect that's going to be really important for Monday is, and one of our main aspects of the week is we've got Venus is going to be trining Uranus. And that happens roughly at the same time we're going to be seeing these sextiles here. So you could see that Venus is coming into a nice supportive trine with the fire bringer. And of course, trines are of the nature of Jupiter, Jupiter being the greater benefic, bringing good stuff into our life. It's a very harmonious and supportive aspect. And this may be, the time to, like I said, create new systems. You may be reviewing some old stuff and you're figuring out what has worked in the past. And as I share this story of cleaning out the attic, I know that it's going to bring up some review of my old life and whether whatever I'm keeping is part of my new expression or not. And that is really, I think that's really an aspect of this retrograde Uranus here. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's a review so that we can move forward in whatever part of our lives that we need to. And Venus is going to be supporting that. Cleaning out the attics of our lives is going to be supporting that new start that we're trying to get forth with Uranus in that Taurus ruled area of the chart. This retrograde Uranus has been active, or is going to be active in the retrograde phase until January, until the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So there's big astrological energy that is going to be coming in January with that conjunction. And this is a great time to just prepare yourself for that new start. Okay. And whatever in whatever Taurus ruled area of your chart, you've probably been feeling new impulses, but now is the time to really review. It's like progress report time. How is it really working out? How is this new expression of the Taurus energy working out for you? And how can you create more efficiency with Virgo? This Virgo season is all about efficiency. I have 3 Virgo planets, and efficiency is a value that I sometimes take to extremes. It can work against me at times, but it is something that I really find joy in. A little personal anecdote. And the beginning of my Virgo season, when the sun ingressed, I received Benjamin Dyke's new book on a new translation, I should say, of Abu Mashar. And it's a book about solar revolutions and solar return charts and timing techniques from the traditional world. And I received that at the same time I got this mat cutting cat brush in the mail. And it was a good day for someone with Virgo placements. Because Virgo, of course, is associated with small pets and small animals. And there's nothing like getting a tool, something useful that will help you to remove the inefficiencies and the flaws within your small pet, like a mat cutting brush. Before, when I had these brushes that would pull at their hair and they'd get really upset and angry, and it'd be this really difficult process. But now with this new fancy brush, it's very smooth. And you'd be amazed at what, when you take a task that had normally been challenging and you make it easy, how much stress that can take out of your life. So I think that that's one of the themes really of the week, is how can you create more efficiency in your systems so that you aren't paddling upstream or against the current. Now it's a better experience for me and my cats, and that brings me a lot of happiness, knowing that both of us are going to feel happier with something, with a task that needed to be done, but might not have been fun for either one of us. So think about the tools that you use this week. Is there a tool that you could maybe acquire that would help you get work done in a more efficient way? To me, that's worth the investment. If you're thinking about how to use your resources, allocate them towards things that will bring a little bit of usefulness into your life this week. So that's Venus trine Uranus. Some of the other themes that I wrote down in my notes is we may see some relationship breakthroughs too. We may get innovative with our relationships. There may be some eccentricities that come up within your relationships. We may feel a little bit restless within romantic relationships. We may be craving a little bit of freedom with Venus trining Uranus. This is true for the week too. Freedom, creative freedom is a theme for the week with all these other contexts. One of the things that Ren Butler said in his book was vivid colors and aesthetic breakthroughs. So think of like beautiful peacock colors with Venus, trining Uranus here. Now, I think some of that's going to be subdued a little bit with Venus in Virgo, because Venus in Virgo is not an ostentatious placement. This is a place where Venus, I think, is going to be like a little bit more muted, a little bit more like, oh, I don't want to be too flashy because I don't want to be presumed arrogant or presumptuous or too like ostentatious. So, there may be some innovations, but it may be quieter. I think that's kind of my feeling on how this is going to work out. Okay. As we move through the day on Monday, we're going to see the opposition from the moon to Saturn at 14 degrees. And one of the things I'm doing here, just so you know, is I'm not necessarily advancing the chart each day to kind of increase some efficiency in these videos, because it takes a little while to go back and forth, and sometimes the annotate button doesn't work. But you'll just have to trust me. There will be an opposition at 14 degrees of the moon and Saturn. So potentially another progress report coming up with the Saturnian area of your life, triggering maybe some limitations and having you become aware of your limitations. Oppositions are, of course, of the nature of Saturn anyway. So, around the evening, 5:45 or so, we may be seeing some of after we've had the conversations of trying to create the new breakthroughs, we may be learning about how they fit into the existing structures of our lives. I think that anytime we see these hard contacts with Saturn, we come face to face with either a constructive no or a limit that we have to work within, some sort of barrier or wall that we may be experiencing. And, those can be healthy. If we have unlimited growth and we don't have structures to build within, that can be very chaotic. So bless Saturn for the beauty of boundaries that it brings to the table. It may be a little annoying. It may be a little depressing sometimes if you're trying to make a new start and you come face to face with your own limitations. But that's part of being human, and that's part of the process that we're working through. Towards the end of the evening, we are going to see a trine with the moon and Neptune. That's very late in the evening Eastern Standard Time, but this is a little bit of a dreamy influence. Of course, we've been seeing that happening regularly when the moon makes contact with Neptune and Pisces. So, of course, we've been really riding the balance of the limitations that Saturn's been presenting and our idealism that's been very strong with Neptune, and our sort of tendency to want to put on the rose-colored glasses and really dive into the illusion of Neptune. Neptune dissolves things. It requires faith. It requires a little bit of a let go and let universe or let God energy. So there is this kind of like alternative thing happening with Saturn creating and dissolving structures, and then Neptune coming in and just kind of creating mud out of the earth that is happening here. So that can lend some confusion sometimes. It can also soften all this earthy energy up a little bit. If you are thinking about how you're creating growth, a little bit of water into the equation of all these earthy placements is what we need to kind of create the proper environment for growth. So maybe dreaming a little bit when we're trying to move forward is healthy and needed. I would say just don't get too carried away with it. Neptune is retrograde right now still. So there is still reevaluations of how all of this fits into the grander picture and the greater scheme. And, Neptune is in the sign of Jupiter right now in Pisces. And there's an expansiveness to this. There is a hopeful quality to it. So, just like I said, this is a good time for dreaming, but dreaming with one foot on the ground. That's Monday. As we move into Tuesday, we are going to see a continuation of that balsamic phase, but the moon is going to be moving into Leo. Okay, in the beginning of the day, about 5 a.m. or so. Now in my chart, it's already passed, but there's going to be an opposition between the moon and Pluto. Again, triggering that Capricorn area of the chart, and that, that whole Saturn South Node Pluto type of, I guess you'd call it a little mini stellium there. I don't think technically it's a stellium because I don't know if we include the South Node in that, but it's a concentration of planetary and otherwise points in the chart. And, we're bringing up all of the gunk from the depths to be dealt with and seeing how it fits within the structures of our lives. Pluto, of course, is associated with kind of the underworld, with kind of a volcanic, nuclear type of energy. It also is very transformative and deals with power dynamics. So there may be some sort of power issue triggered where you may feel a little bit of a challenge to the I don't know, maybe the more domestic parts of your life are running into the more public parts too with this Cancer Capricorn axis. This is hearkening back to that July energy that we experienced when all of the planets were moving through the Cancer Capricorn axis. Now, from my understanding, this axis, a lot of times opposites are concerned with a similar type of expression, but they're coming at it from different directions. And from what I've understood about this axis, it's a little bit about security. Okay. And Cancer is coming from a domestic, family orientated way, from I'm going to collect around me my crew, my team, my kin, the people that I have some sort of shared root with. And I'm going to create security by insulating that within that domestic family sphere. Well, Capricorn is creating security through its movement generally out in society, through its community, through its ability to ascend the mountain, and its status. Okay, its ability to create structure out in the world. So whenever we have this opposition activated, there's a little bit of conflict that can come in between sometimes our domestic expression and our expression out in the world. So keep an eye on that. On Tuesday morning, very early, bringing up maybe some power dynamics that may feel a little bit limiting with Pluto opposite the moon. As we go forward in the day, the moon is going to be moving into the sign of Leo and, continuing its balsamic phase. Now, not a whole lot of aspects on Tuesday besides this opposition very early to Pluto. So this may be a good time to just get down to business without the planets kind of getting involved with all this. Yes, we have, these trines still active from everything in Virgo, but we're not going to have anything perfect besides that Pluto moon opposition in the beginning of the day. Okay, as we move into Wednesday, let's see what happens when we move into Wednesday. So we move into Wednesday, you see that we have the moon is in Leo, and we are going to be seeing a square to the moon, to Uranus, and that happens around 6:30 a.m. Eastern time. Okay, and of course squares are the nature of Mars. So this is a challenging aspect where we may have some conflicts. We may have some differences of opinions that come up in the Leo and Taurus ruled area of our life. We saw, when all the planets were moving through Leo over the course of August and late July, we saw these squares happening with all of the other planetary dynamics. And now the moon is going to be taking its turn, making that square. So it may trigger some unexpected events that you may have to deal with some sort of challenge in those two areas of your life. This could, again, trigger issues of authority and how to use resources in relationship with authority. And I say that because the sign of Leo is ruled by the sun, and the sun it has a commanding, authoritative energy to it. So there's something where we might be experiencing a little bit of a conflict with an authority figure or something like that. We may have the issue of pride and stubbornness coming across, a desire to do something a new way, but we may be fixed in the old way of doing things. So just on Wednesday morning, very early, be aware of that as you move through the beginning of your day, and try not to get too fixed in your position, because it's going to be creating some tension in your life if you get too entrenched in your personal, subjective opinion or position. As we move forward through the day, Mars is going to be making its trine to Uranus. I'm telling you, everything trine Uranus. So Uranus is really a highlight this week. So we've got now Mars trining, okay, the nature of Jupiter at 6 degrees of Virgo and 6 degrees of Taurus. And this can really give us an energetic boost. Mars wants to take action. Mars wants to have courage. Mars wants to be active. Mars wants to, do something. And this may encourage us to really take an innovative action. We may feel really electric. We may feel very yang with this. Even though that the Mars and Uranus are both in yin signs, we may be taking action, maybe even behind the scenes a little bit. It may be not super public. This may be more of an internal feeling where we're like, oh, I have to do this, or I really need to make this change. It may be the kind of influence that helps you make the change that came up when you did some reflecting when the moon was in Cancer. You may get a rush of energy. There could be an urge to take an action that brings you greater freedom in your life. It may be something where you feel an adrenaline rush or something like that. So be aware of that. That's happening around, I don't know. When is this perfecting? Well, this is going to be active for most of the day because Mars doesn't move super fast. But just keep an eye out on that. You can see it's almost exact at 7 a.m. here. So that's going to be one of the things to keep an eye out on Wednesday, is that particular aspect is going to be perfecting. The other thing that's going to be happening is the moon is going to be making a trine later in the evening to Jupiter. Okay, so you can see the moon at 14 degrees of Leo is going to be making a trine with Sagittarius at 14 or 15 degrees here. It's almost into 15 degrees. So that may give us a really hopeful energy. We may be taking action with some very detailed things in our life and bringing some practical energy to the table. And that may really give us a boost in feeling pretty good about ourselves and our sense of identity with the moon in Leo, and with our hopefulness and our optimism towards the future with Jupiter and Sagittarius. Jupiter and Sagittarius loves to see the big picture and the vision and how it all fits together. Now, there's a little bit of a conflict happening this week by a whole sign with all these planets in Virgo and with Jupiter and Sagittarius. There is a square that's happening by a whole sign. None of these things are perfecting quite yet or becoming exact, but we may be starting to see a little bit of tension coming into the mix with how we are playing out the tiny, small details of our vision and how they fit within the greater picture. So just be aware that may be a tension that is just an underlying feeling that we may be experiencing over the course of the week. The other thing that's happening that's just kind of a underlying energetic principle here is that all of these Virgo planets are going to be opposing Neptune in Pisces. So this is kind of this T-square energy of, how does it fit into the vision? What is the reality, Virgo, versus the ideal, Neptune in Pisces? And how does it all fit into, how do we create a plan that we can, take action on out in the world? So this is a lot of mutable energy in the sky too. There's a lot of changes happening right now, and we're being required to be very flexible. I think that's the real key, is the flexibility. How can you allow new ideas to come in without getting completely fixated on the old way of doing things? Okay. So that is Wednesday, the 28th. As we move into Thursday, August 29th, the moon is going to be in Leo, but it is moving into Virgo around 8 o'clock p.m. or so. And our good friend Mercury is going to be shifting into Virgo, which is a very good thing. This is going to alleviate a lot of the tensions that we're feeling at the beginning of the week. because Mercury is the host or the ruler or the steward of Virgo. And when a planet comes back to its own domicile, it is able to provide resources for the other planets that are traveling through or making a pit stop in its home. Now, at the beginning of the week, Mercury was what was called in aversion, okay, to all of those planets. It was not able to witness them through a whole sign aspect. That was a problem. The beginning of the week, we may not be able to get the resources we need to take all the actions that we want to take. Now, when Mercury moves into Virgo, all of that changes. Mercury gains an enormous amount of essential dignity by being in its own home sign, because Mercury has kind of this double whammy of domicile and exaltation. It's also going to be in its own terms at the beginning of the week too. So it's going to get to set its own agenda. Our thinking might get clearer. We may really start to get epiphanies that happen in all these different areas of our life, because we have these all of these planets in Virgo. Many areas of our life are going to be connected to this Virgo energy, because each of these planets, minus the sun, is responsible for two other houses or places in the chart. So Mercury is going to be responsible for not only the Virgo area, but the Gemini area. Okay. Mars is going to be responsible for both your Scorpio and your Aries house or place. Okay. Venus is going to be responsible for your Taurus place and your Libra place. So one house is distributing energy for at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas of your life. So all of these things are kind of mashed up in this like Virgo soup, and it's going to have an effect on many different types of things that you're trying to achieve all at once. And some of this is really, this is the time. Over the last few weeks, different schools have been starting. All of our schedules are changing, and that really does have an effect. When you're going back to school, that changes your dinner plans. That changes what time you have to get up in the morning. That changes your routines. All of these things are kind of, married together, and they're all sitting at the table now with Mercury. And at the new moon on Friday morning, the moon's going to trigger all this stuff. So Friday is really a big day, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the other thing that's kind of neat about this Mercury being in Virgo is Mercury is said to be in its chariot. And that is a traditional concept where a planet that has dignity, like domicile or exaltation or things like that, is going to sort of be shielded from the beams of the sun. So right now, Mercury is within 15 degrees of the sun under the beams, but when it moves into its own domicile, it is said to be in the chariot. And that's a protective. Chariots in ancient times had these like awnings on the top of them to protect whoever was in there from the beams of the sun. So that's where that kind of concept comes from, is like you've got this nice umbrella shade now that allows Mercury to kind of do more mercurial things without being burned up or being harmed by the beams of the sun. So that's a very positive thing that's going to help everything run a lot smoother. Because before, when Mercury was in Leo, it was getting burned up by those beams. It wasn't in its chariot. It had no protection. It was very exposed or vulnerable. And like I said, this is going to be providing for all of these different planets here. Okay. So that's Mercury in the first decan of Virgo. And of course, I talked last week about the 8 of Pentacles. And this is somebody who's working very diligently on their craft. It's a card of the apprentice. It's about work ethic. It's about getting down to brass tacks and doing the work. And this is going to be a time where, everything's just starting to require you to just get down to business. Leo season is done at the end of the week. Okay, Leo, it was fun while it lasted, but it's not really necessarily time for fun anymore. It's time for getting down to business. And there is a time for that. And I think that just accepting that and going with it instead of begrudging it is going to really let everything run a lot smoother in your life. Okay. The moon is going to be conjoining Mercury at about 10:22 p.m. that day. And then we're going to have the next of our trines, where the sun is going to be making its trine to Uranus. Everything must trine. I feel like I'm in like a, furniture commercial. Everything must go. Everything must trine. So now we're going to see our sense of identity, our sense of authority, our ability to command action, getting a little boost by its trine to Uranus. This may be, we may be feeling a new sense of accomplishment or a new sense of identity that comes through our ability to restructure our life and to reskill. This is a really great innovative quality and energy for reskilling yourself and really committing to a new course of study or something like that. And shameless plug, I do have a new class starting on September 23rd, Domiciles and Deities. If you're in the local Ann Arbor area and you want to learn more about traditional astrology in a very fun and game-based way, check out the link in the description if you like that, and email me at spencermichaudastrology@gmail.com if you have any questions. Shameless plug over with. So when the sun is, now the sun is in the terms of Mercury as well. So there's going to be a kind of a mercurial quality to our identities. We're going to be searching again for more freedom. This may also be a time where we want to break free from some authority in our life. But in general, with the trine, it's a positive type of way that we're experiencing that solar authority and its relationship with Uranus. Now, you may be getting some surprises this week. With Uranus, it always kind of speaks to the unexpected on some level. But those surprises with all the trines may actually be good. Okay, they may be nice surprises this week. Not all surprises are nice. But there may be some things this week that are like, oh, well, that's a pleasant little surprise. I didn't expect that. And it doesn't have to be a big surprise. With Virgo placements, they may be the little things in life. There may be little surprises that happens, little moments that give you humble inspiration. I think that's one of the things with Sun in Virgo trine Uranus there's some humility involved with it. Some of the things I wrote in my notes were flashes of intelligence and brilliance, progressive leadership. So maybe you're able to take some leadership in your life in a very humble, service-orientated way that is very progressive because it's making a contact with Uranus there. All right, let's talk a little bit about Friday. Let's move forward into Friday here. As we move into Friday, we are finally in the new moon phase. And this new moon is at 6 degrees, 47 minutes of Virgo. You can see in my chart it's a little bit past the full moon, but that full moon is happening about 6:37 a.m. And this is when we are seeing the germination of the new karmic seed. This is where it's a trigger point where we're getting new impulses, we're getting new events that are going to be struggling to take form over the course of the new moon cycle. Yes, it is a time for setting intentions and things like that, but I think those intentions are just going to be bubbling up from the subconscious anyway. Yes, you may have to get down to work to manifest those things into reality, but I want to reiterate my thoughts about new moons, and they're not just like, oh, you just get to ask and get whatever you want. I don't think it works that way. I think it just triggers a new cycle of karmic events in your life that you have to deal with. And yes, you can be a little bit proactive about that, but I would not think of new moons as like, oh, it's just like time to send my Christmas list to the universe. I don't really believe that, and you're free to disagree with me on that. But I think if we think of it like that, we won't get so bent out of shape if things crop up that aren't to our liking. Okay, I think this is the mature way of dealing with a new moon is, yes, we can try to initiate things that we desire, but we can also understand that it's like our cosmic assignment for the next moon cycle is being given to us. And I'm paused for emphasis there. The new cosmic assignment of the work that needs to be done. And I emphasize work for this particular new moon too, because Virgo season is all about getting down to work. What is the new work that you're going to need to do to prepare for the winter? What kind of frenetic energy are you going to have to do to start getting yourself in good shape so that you have enough to survive maybe the impending shortages that inevitably come with winter? Fortune favors the prepared. I think that's the thing to realize about this new moon is how are you going to become prepared for the next cycle of energy? And how are you going to get down to work and get down to business to make sure that you're going to set yourself up for success? This new moon makes an enormous amount of contacts. It's going to be trining Uranus, so there's some innovative quality, perhaps even a slightly unexpected quality to this new moon. There may be some things that get shaken up a little bit. And then it's, successively going to be making conjunctions to both Mars and Venus. And it's also sitting at the table with its host, Mercury. So this new moon is going to trigger, it's like I said, this is triggering many different areas of life at once. And that can feel a little bit overwhelming. The downside of all this Virgo energy is we get a little bit frenetic. Our mind gets a little bit cluttered up, and we may feel some anxiety about things. That was one of the flaws that have generally been associated with Virgo, is a little bit of an anxious anxiety type of energy. And I think where that anxiety comes from is seeing all the work that needs to be done before the winter and feeling overwhelmed about getting it all done. And also, when you have an awareness of the impending winter, you have this kind of like, I don't know, what would you call it? Urgency. You have a sense of urgency that, oh my God, I'm aware of the winter. I better make hay while the sun's still shining and get this stuff done before it's really cold and before I'm snowed under and before everything starts to decay around me. So if you're feeling that sense of urgency, I think it's okay to follow those impulses to get things done, but try not to overdo it. Realize that I think if you make your actions and you take your actions in a way that is balanced and a way that is measured, you're going to be able to get more done than if you just, are running around like a chicken with your head cut off and worrying about everything. A lot of times the anxiety we feel gets alleviated when we just start doing things. I know this is true for the procrastinators in the world too. I being one of them. I was so worried about something being perfect or being overwhelmed by it that I would just stare at the ceiling when I had things to do when I was younger. And I've realized that to alleviate that feeling of dread, because I couldn't allow myself to do anything else, that I just need to start doing something. And as I start doing it, as I go through, the pain of procrastination is worse than the pain of actually doing something. Actually doing it alleviates that pain. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind with this new moon. Just get down to business and you'll feel a lot less anxious if you're actually taking some concrete steps towards your next goal or plan. Okay. In addition, like I said, we've got that square with Jupiter. So it's activating all these aspects we've been talking about over the week. The opposition to Neptune, the square with Jupiter, the trine also with Saturn. So there's really, everything is kind of getting involved here. I'm not even seeing any planet that is not involved in an aspect now. Do you see that? How incredible is that? Everything is involved here. All this Virgo stuff is either trining, opposing, or squaring everything in the sky. Nothing is in inversion anymore. Everything is working together in this cosmic symphony, this music of the spheres. That's kind of a beautiful thing. I'm just taking a moment to appreciate that and how everything is kind of interconnected in the sky this week. And take a moment to appreciate that in your life as everything is competing for your attention at once. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Venus in the second decan. because if you notice here now, Venus is in the second decan of Virgo. And we'll talk about the tarot card associated with that a little bit, which is the Six of Wands. I'm going to stop my share for a minute here. Oops. Okay, so you can see me. So here is the Nine of Wands. And here we see a lovely woman with adorned in a fancy garment, which has kind of the symbol of flowers that look sort of like Venus, which is apropos because this decan is ruled by Venus. And she is in a beautiful garden, and she has a falcon that is blindfolded sitting on her hand. And she seems to be enjoying a little respite in her very luxurious garden. She's maybe done some of the hard work of the apprentice and enjoying some of the fruits of her labor. Also, the falcon is important, and I think this is one of the themes of this card. We are still in a Virgo decan. We're still concerned with questions of efficiency and sorting things into categories and eliminating what doesn't serve us anymore. And that falcon's important. Now the apprentice has become skilled. All right. It takes a lot of time and training to train a falcon to, I don't know, hunt for you, to eliminate the vermin that may want to spoil all of the storehouses that you've worked so hard to fill, and to all of the crops that you've grown over the summer. So this is about training your inner falcon, or your outer one, if you're into falconry. And it can be your metaphorical falcon. It's training the impulse to be able to eliminate the things that don't serve you and that aren't part of your goals moving into the winter. So this is about really refining your projects. And beauty is going to be enhanced by Venus being in her own decan. Okay, so this is about seeing the balance and the beauty and the aesthetic of form, and being able to eliminate what is counteracting that beauty and form by using our inner falcon. Okay, so something to consider as Venus moves into the second decan. She gains some dignity there. All right. Okay. This face was called Gain in Book T in the Book of Thoth. It also, one of the things that stuck out to me as I was researching this, I like to read a couple different things. I like to read the Book T and Austin Coppock's 36 Faces book. One of the things he described in it that I thought was really interesting was this decan being associated with Hephaestus, the what was he called? The blacksmith. That's the word I'm looking for. Because Austin calls this the hammer and the anvil. And Hephaestus was the cosmic blacksmith, creating things. He was said to be kind of ugly, but also creating things very beautiful. And he was at one point married to Aphrodite. So there is some beauty in crafting in the flames and hammering things into form. Okay, and it's about the balance of beauty and ugliness, and about really putting the beauty of hard work, I think, is something that really comes to mind with this. The efficiency, setting high standards for what you're doing without making them impossible standards. I think this is really the decan of quality control. So it's kind of saying what within your project needs to be worked on to make it run at its peak efficiency. Okay, so that's the Nine of Pentacles. The weekend, if I share my screen one more time here, we're coming to the end of our video here. Thanks for hanging with me. Really appreciate it. I'm trying to get these out a little faster for you so you don't have to, make a 2-hour commitment to listen to them. I know that's a lot of time. I appreciate your attention, though. As we move into Saturday, we're going to see the moon moving into Libra at the end of the day. And really the only aspect we're seeing is the moon making a trine to Pluto. So this again is going to be triggering that, bringing up those power dynamics bringing up the issues from the depths. But in this time it might be in a more supportive way. The things that you learned at the opposition, you may be able to integrate them more into your life. They may be supporting you of the nature of Jupiter rather than feeling like a limitation. So that's something that's happening on Saturday, the 31st. That's really the only aspect we've got going on that day. We're still in that new moon phase. That's going to be throughout the whole weekend here. And as we move to Sunday, we are seeing Mercury's trine with Uranus. Everything must trine. Everything must trine. Uranus. Okay. That's where we get really some really beautiful flashes of inspiration. And of course, when Mercury is trining Uranus, everything is affected. The sun's affected. Mars is affected. Venus is affected. This could be a really, really inspiring aspect, and because we may be really starting to see how all the pieces start to fit together, how all the little changes that we're making are affecting all the different areas of our life. And we may really have a lightning quick intellect or mind. We may get flashes of inspiration. We may become very inventive. We have additional flexibility of the mind and the tongue. You may be able to communicate things a lot easier than you would have in the past. In addition, you may feel a little restless. You may have some overstimulation. There's a prominent trickster energy to Mercury, so be on guard for playing too many practical jokes on your friends with this aspect, or your family. And I think this is the notes that I put for this was the skill of Mercury and all these Virgo placements are meeting the fertile ground, the new fertile ground of Uranus that we're trying to dredge up with plowing the fields of Taurus. So this is where skill meets a fertile ground. It's kind of the tools of harvest, like the scythe meeting the grain. Okay, it's like the shovel digging into the new ground and turning over a beautiful piece of, humus or loamy soil, and you can see that it's teeming with life and worms, and it's well aerated and things like that. And there's a satisfaction with using that perfect tool to kind of dredge up the ground and break up all the soil and get rid of the weeds and things like that. And that may be this moment that you feel some real satisfaction in the work that you've been doing. Towards the end of the day, we are seeing a trine between Venus and Saturn here at 14 degrees. Another positive aspect. There's a lot of positive aspects this week. This feels like it's going to be a good week, or at least one that we feel pretty like we're finally making some progress, at least towards the end of this week here. Now, the combination of Venus and Saturn, this is an interesting one too. Venus, of course, associated with cleanliness. Saturn, in the tradition, had some significations of things that were dirty and disgusting and like repulsive. So this may be another moment where we are helping to bring cleanliness to places of disrepair. So this may be a really good time to, really finish off your efficiency projects. Maybe this will be the time where I finally, I've cleaned out all the junk in the attic and I donate half of it to the thrift store or something like that. I like the combination of Venus and Saturn with cleaning up the messes in our life. So this may be a really positive aspect for cleaning up the mess. In relationships, if we look at it from a different angle, this is a quality of endurance that comes in, a quality of commitment, of sobering up our relationships. So there may be something where we really get a reality check within the way that we're relating to people, but it's a good one. It's a good reality check. Again, when we have positive contacts with Saturn, we are learning about limitation and be able to grow within those limitations and eliminating the things in a healthy way that aren't serving us anymore. This brings a little bit of stability to Venus, right? Now, Saturn is retrograde right now, so there's a little bit of that's a little challenging. Saturn isn't functioning as well as it could if it was direct, but of course those outer planets go retrograde for at least half or a third of the year. If they're outer planets, they move really slow, so it's not uncommon. It may, with the retrograde nature though, there may be a quality of having to kind of submit or surrender to the Saturnian impulse that's coming in, because the planet itself is going in diurnal motion, retrograde. It's of the nature of the divine rather than using its own planetary will. Do you see what I'm saying? When it's in zodiacal motion, the planetary will is expressed, and it's easier for them to bring about their significations here on Earth. But when it's of the nature of the divine here going in retrograde motion, it kind of has to surrender its energy to divine will. And the planet isn't always happy, but it's like a positive course correction that can help you to figure out sort of the purpose behind what you're doing. And then when it goes forward again, you can maybe take actions that are more a true expression of your higher self. So it's something to keep in mind with when we have trines to the retrograde planets or any contacts with retrograde planets in general. The last two aspects of the day are a square from the moon to Saturn. So yes, we have that Venus thing that's kind of nice earlier in the day, but then we've got this lunar thing that's maybe bringing a little bit of tension. And it is, of course, in the sign of relationships and balance and justice and fairness. So there may be something that feels a little bit out of whack or out of balance or a little unfair, maybe from some sort of authority figure or from some sort of system that's greater than ourselves. Saturn in Capricorn is maybe the great bureaucracy. Maybe we come across something where we have to surrender or have a little bit of a conflict with some sort of bureaucratic red tape in our life, and that may cause a little bit of a tension. I always suggest with the moon in Libra, use our good Venus harmonizing skills and be patient and try to use your manners to get through that challenge, and that might be something to think about on Sunday. The last aspect of the day that we have is a sextile from the moon to Jupiter, and that is a fairly positive thing that helps maybe alleviate some of the junk that we may be dealing with that square to Saturn. This brings a little bit of optimism and hope into play, and a little bit of help. Okay, it's really helping. Jupiter's like, oh, I'll help. Oh, you're going into the bureaucracy? Here's some sort of gift, with the sextile there. So that's really the aspects that we have for the week. Looking ahead, next week we have, it's Cazimi week next week, where Mars and Mercury are going to be conjoining the sun at various points and rebirthing different parts of their cycle. We have a number of aspects too. We have Venus squaring Jupiter. We have Mercury conjoining Mars, Venus opposing Neptune, Mercury trining Saturn, a square with Mercury and Jupiter, the Sun trines Saturn, Venus trines Pluto. We have a Mercury opposition with Neptune, the Sun is squaring Jupiter, and then, of course, Mercury is going to be making a trine with Pluto towards the end of the week. So that's kind of looking ahead. Some Cazimi action, some rebirths, and a bunch of aspects with these mutable planets that we are seeing with this kind of T-square thing perfecting. Okay? So that is your weekly forecast. Thank you for hanging out. And of course, I do have a class that's starting in Ann Arbor, Michigan on the 23rd of September, Domiciles and Deities, where we're going to be doing some interactive role-playing, learning all of these techniques that I've been talking about in the videos and kind of embodying the planets. The basic gist of it is that we're going to have, we're going to be playing out as not necessarily just as the planets, but as daimons, okay, as intermediaries between the planets and the mortal worlds. And a lot of our actions are going to be helping to bring the planetary impulse to the mortal that we're trying to help give witness and testimony to. So it'll be a really interesting experience. I think I'm having a lot of fun designing the mechanics around it. It's very challenging as well, trying to bring a complete system like Hellenistic and traditional astrology to a sort of game model has its own unique challenges to be true to the system itself and to make it fun and playable for the players. But I've been getting a lot of really nice advice from various people in my life, and I want to give a shout out to them if they're listening. They know who they are. And thank you for all your help. And I think we're going to have a really good time with this class. I'm very excited about it. And I think it's going to be something really unique and innovative, and be something that'll help people really learn in a way that isn't just hearing someone talk at them. They're going to learn by doing. And that's so Virgo, right? Learn by doing. All right. And if you like these videos, be sure to subscribe and share them with your friends on your social medias. I've also been putting a donate kind of button, or a tip jar, so to speak, with a Venmo link. If you want to leave me a tip for these videos, there's a Venmo link and a PayPal me link where you can just put a few bucks in there. That actually really helps me to make these videos, and I put a lot of time and effort into these, and I did get a nice little tip last week, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. And it really does, it's very meaningful to me that people are paying attention and appreciate these things. So thank you. And I hope that you all have a really good day and a good week ahead. So I will sign off here. This is Spencer Michaud, and have a good week, everyone. Take care.